Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing 2 cards featuring the brand new holiday release from pinkfreshstudio.com, and we are celebrating with a blog hop. So if you want to head on over to my blog right now, I will have it linked in the description below. Over there you will find out how you can win prizes and see a lot more inspiration with this release. Now today I am using the Thrill of Hope hot foil plates as well as the coordinating stamps. I'm not actually using the stamps, but I wanted to show them to you today, and the coordinating dies. And I will be using this Thrill of Hope stencil layering set. Now I'm going to show you a technique featuring this stencil layering tech called double stenciling. And I've chosen some of the Pinkfresh Studio greens. I'm using fresh pear, olive, and evergreen for my stenciling today. Now, also included in this release are several hot foil plates. You are going to love these, and I will have a video tomorrow featuring the Abstract Triangles hot foil plate. And I quickly wanted to show you just some of the products from this release real quick. There are so many great items, including this Perfect Sentiments Holiday hot foil plate coordinating die and stamp set. And there is a brand new gold foil washi in this release as well. So let's get started with the project. I have my Gemini foil press here, and I am going to take the Thrill of Hope hot foil plates and place them with the flat backside onto the platform of my foil press. And I have trimmed down some little squares of champagne foil. This is a Spellbinder's Glimmer foil. You can use either the Glimmer foil or the Crafter's Companion foil with these hot foil plates. And I'm placing that foil with the pretty side facing the face of my hot foil plate. So the dull or not pretty side will face my paper when I place that on top. And to build my sandwich, I'm just going to finish it off with the shim that comes with the Gemini foil press. I set my timer to 15 seconds, and once that timer's done and my plate has been heated, I'm going to remove that from the base and run it through my Gemini Junior die cut machine. Now you will notice I have my Gemini foil press on the medium heat setting, and once I run it through my Gemini Junior, I am going to have these beautifully pressed foil sentiments. Now I absolutely love foiling, but if foiling's not your thing, these are available in stamps as well, so you could do the same technique with an embossing technique. But look at that shine that you get with the foil. I absolutely love it. Now I'm going to take the coordinating dies and I'm going to hold them in place using some removable tape, some low tack tape. This happens to be a highlighter tape, and I will have that linked in the description below so you can check that out. And once I run that through my Gemini Junior, they are going to die cut beautifully. I love these dies because they actually cut out some of the centers and the in-betweens on these sentiments so that they really are, instead of being too solid, they have some areas that are cut out, and I love it when dies do that. So now that I have my sentiments foiled and ready for my card, I'm going to go ahead and start with the double stenciling technique. Now I have 5 stencils in this layering stencil set, and I am going to be stenciling onto some Hammermill paper here. I will have it linked in the description below. I also use this for my foiling, and I find that it foils absolutely beautifully. And I'm going to start with the base of this wreath. So this is stencil number 1, and I have both my paper and the stencil pressed up or pushed up into that upper right-hand corner of my Misty stamping tool. Now you could tape this in place instead, but I find using my Misty stamping tool for this is a great way to easily align my stencils, because if I make sure that everything's pushed up into that upper right-hand corner every single time, I know that each subsequent stencil in this layering stencil set will line up perfectly. So I'm starting with an ink blending of some fresh pear using the base of this wreath, and here's where the double stenciling comes in. This wreath on its own has kind of a very light and airy feel, but I wanted it to feel much more substantial. So I'm going to take this same stencil, this is stencil number 1, and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees so that I get another area that's stenciled using the same stencil. Now what you could do is you could also kind of flip this stencil over, or kind of offset it in a way. But if you were to flip this stencil over, the wreath kind of would poke out in different areas. By just rotating at 180 degrees, this kind of keeps it all contained in the same space and all of the leaves kind of going in the same direction. So I've stenciled once again using the fresh pear ink, and now I'm moving on to stencil number 2, and I'm using it right now the way that it was intended. So that means that the number 2 on this stencil is in the upper left-hand corner. Once I stencil that with the Evergreen ink, I am going to go ahead and rotate it again 180 degrees, and I'm going to stencil again using the Evergreen ink. Now I've skipped stencil number 3 because that's my berry layer, and I want to heat emboss those in some gold embossing powder. So I'm skipping that for now, and I'm moving on to stencil number 4. And I am using the Pinkfresh Studio Olive ink to add the detail layer to that original wreath that we stenciled. And finally, I'm moving to stencil number 5, which has kind of like these little branches. Now I'm doing these in gathered twigs. You could also do this in that Evergreen ink as well. I kind of think that these should be a little darker than the others. So once I have all of this stenciling done, you can see I've brought in my VersaMark ink, and I'm going to go back to stencil number 3, and I'm going to add some VersaMark ink through my stencil. And since I'm heat embossing on top of all of this inking, I want to make sure I go over the entire surface of this really well with my Embossing Buddy powder bag. Then I'm going to place stencil number 3, and once again, I'm lining it up using the upper right-hand corner of my Misty Stamping Tool. And I'm going to use a sponge ink blending tool applicator to pick up the VersaMark ink and kind of pounce this ink into the openings of this stencil. And this is going to put a nice layer of VersaMark ink into the berry portion of this wreath. Now you could also ink blend this with some like red ink or something like that, but I really wanted all of these cards to kind of be just green and gold. I thought that would be really beautiful. I saw some pre-printed cards on Target.com that kind of inspired this idea of all green with gold accents, and I thought it would be fun to use with this Thrill of Hope stencil set. So once I have the VersaMark ink stenciled onto my wreath, I'm going to pull it out of my Misty Stamping Tool, and I'm sprinkling on some gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and I'm kind of flicking off the excess, and then I'm going to heat set that embossing powder, and it turns into this really beautiful shiny gold. Now, once I'm done heat setting this, I'm going to place this back into the upper right-hand corner of my Misty Stamping Tool. And once again, I'm going to rotate my stencil 180 degrees so that I get another stenciling of these berries onto the wreath. Now, before I stencil onto it with the VersaMark ink again, I am going to prep the surface of this wreath using my embossing powder bag here to prevent any excess powder from sticking in areas that I don't want it. And then I hold my stencils in place with my Misty magnets. I just find that using a Misty for this purpose, it's another great way to use your Misty Stamping Tool, and it really makes stenciling with all of these layering stencils very easy. So once again, I've pounced on my VersaMark ink through the stencil. I've removed my piece from my Misty Stamping Tool, and I'm using the gilded embossing powder again. Now, if there are areas where embossing powder is sticking and you don't want it to stick, you can go ahead and use a clean, dry paintbrush to remove the excess embossing powder, and then I went ahead and heat set that again. Now, I wanted to give you a look at this wreath kind of stenciled as it was intended, and then also using the double stenciling technique that I just showed you. So the image on the left is the single stencil as it was intended, and the image on the right is the double stenciling. So you can see you get a much fuller wreath when you do that double stenciling technique. Now I'm going to take both of these images and I'm going to use the diagonal stitched rectangles from Pinkfresh Studio to die cut these into a card front, and I will have that beautiful stitched area or stitched border around this rectangle. And then I am going to use some of the Starry Night watercolors. These are some metallic watercolors to do a little paint flicking onto my cards. Now, this is not something I normally do because normally I want a little more control than what this will give me, but I've gone ahead and prepped my gold watercolor here, and I'm transferring some onto this acrylic block. And then I'm going to use a really small brush because I don't want too big of globs of this gold metallic watercolor on my card front. And I'm just going to use that paintbrush and flick the paint from the acrylic block onto my card front. Now I did this on both of the single stenciled wreath and the double stenciled wreath, and then I allowed those to dry. And then I took my sentiments and I added 3 more layers of die cut cardstock behind them. So I just used some liquid adhesive to stack those up and give them some dimension. And I also have some of the Curvy Leaves die cuts from Pinkfresh Studio, die cut from some Vellum here. And I'm attaching those to the card front using some of the Barely Arts liquid glue. Now, once I get those kind of stems and vines onto the card, those just kind of give it a little more layering, a little more depth. I'm going to take some of this gold sparkle twine. I have 2 lengths of it here, and I'm tying both of the lengths together into a bow. And then I'm going to attach that to my wreath using some liquid glue. Now I'm finishing these cards off using some of the gold metallic pearls here from Pinkfresh Studio. And I'm using a crystal katana from Studio Katia here to pick up the pearls and add the liquid glue underneath them and then place them back onto my card. And finally, I'll finish off the card by adding my layered sentiment here. So I'm just adding a little bit of liquid glue, and I have that beautiful foiled sentiment right there in the lower right-hand corner of this wreath. And one of these wreaths uses the sentiment from that set that says Thrill of Hope, and the other one says Season of Wonder. Now, once I place the sentiment onto the card front, because it has some other things behind it, I went ahead and stacked some acrylic blocks on top of that and let them dry so that they could really make some good contact with all of the layers that are underneath it. And then I am going to add a layer of gold metallic cardstock behind each of these card fronts. Now you can see the gold metallic cardstock there on the left actually has a rectangle die cut out of the center. And that's because I am running out of this gold cardstock. And so I thought I would save the center of it so I could use it for another project. And I just have a frame, but when you layer this on top, no one will ever know that the middle back side of this layer is missing. Now I got these all layered up and I was having a really hard time deciding what color card base I wanted to use. So I cut several of them and I tried them, and I wanted to show you all of the different options here. Now in the end, I ended up adding some foam adhesive onto the back of these card fronts and attaching them to a craft A2 size top folding card base. So I cut the cardstock to 4¼ inches by 11 inches and scored it at 5½ to create that top folding A2 size card. And that finishes off my cards for today, featuring the double stenciling technique and these brand new gorgeous holiday products from Pinkfresh Studio. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, these projects are a part of a blog hop celebrating the brand new holiday 2021 release from Pinkfresh Studio. And for more information on that, you can head on over to my blog. It is linked in the description below. Or if you're looking for any of the products in particular, you can check the description box. I have all of those linked there for you as usual. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching today. I really hope you enjoyed these projects. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on my YouTube channel. And tell me which of these 2 cards is your favorite, the single stenciling technique or the double stenciling technique. As always, I would appreciate if you like this video, if you would go ahead and share it with a friend as well. Thanks again for watching. I'm so glad you're here. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you are here at this time, you are one of my favorites. To subscribe to my channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more videos I thought you would enjoy.